Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little bit different, but honestly, it is incredibly powerful. We're going to take a single, profound sentence, one you've probably heard a million times before, and we're going to analyze it entirely through the sophisticated, data-driven lens of a 30-year career in actuarial science and risk management. We're stripping away all the motivational sentimentality to look at the raw, undeniable mathematical truth behind long-term stability and the sheer compounding power of persistent effort.
Here's how we're going to break it all down today. First, we'll look at the ultimate risk principle. Then, we'll analyze our main variable, which is pace. After that, we'll cover the catastrophe of stopping, the actual math of persistence, and finally, we'll map this all out over a 30-year horizon.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the ultimate risk principle. This is going to set up our entire foundation.
So here's our entire source text for today's explainer. It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop. Now, on the surface, I know this sounds like a nice motivational platitude, right? Like something you'd see printed on a poster in a guidance counselor's office. But we're going to prove to you today that this is actually a flawless, ironclad principle of risk mitigation. When you apply this exact phrasing to a multi-decade career, it isn't just poetry anymore. It's literally a mathematical formula for surviving and thriving.
We actually call this the persistence theorem. You see, in risk management, your ultimate goal is always to avoid catastrophic ruin while maximizing your long-term yield. This definition highlights that continuous, non-zero effort is your absolute primary shield against that failure. It's the engine that allows for the long-term compounding of your skills, your network, and your reputation.
Which brings us nicely to Section 2, analyzing the variable pace. Let's break this equation down into its core components.
The quote specifically calls out slowness, how slowly you go. Now, in the highly volatile world of a professional career, going slowly translates perfectly to holding a low volatility, highly reliable asset. Think about it. A low volatility asset doesn't give you these wild, overnight spikes in value, but crucially, it also doesn't crash unexpectedly. It provides steady, predictable returns. Think of it like a boring but incredibly reliable index fund instead of a wild meme stock. When you purposefully regulate your pace, you are transforming your daily output into a highly reliable, low-risk asset that can weather economic downturns, industry shifts, and personal stress.
This really hits the nail on the head when we contrast the modern myth of the overnight hustle with the professional reality of measured pacing. Look at those high-velocity sprints. They have incredibly high variance. You might get a frantic amount of work done in a single month, but the friction is immense, and the risk of early burnout is elevated to completely dangerous levels. It is just mathematically unsustainable over a 30-year timeline. But then, look at measured pacing, low variance. You're sustaining your energy expenditure, literally deliberately slowing down, which allows for a steady, unbroken progression of data. And in this case, that data is your career growth.
Okay, moving on to Section 3, the catastrophe of stopping. We have to talk about this because it's the single biggest threat in our entire 30-year model.
As long as you do not stop. Now, in our actuarial framework today, stopping isn't just taking a weekend off or going on a vacation. Those are planned pauses for maintenance. Stopping, in this context, represents a total default. It's the moment you actually abandon the path, give up on those compounding skills, and completely zero out your forward momentum. When you stop, you aren't just hitting pause, you are resetting the entire compound interest equation of your life's work.
It's funny, we tend to obsess over that 15% slice, right? We worry we aren't getting promoted fast enough or we aren't learning that new software quick enough. But look at that massive 85% chunk. The math tells us a really surprising truth here. The overwhelming majority of career failure doesn't come from a lack of speed. It comes from a complete cessation of effort. The danger of moving slowly is mathematically insignificant compared to the massive, looming threat of burning out and stopping completely.
So, let's look at Section 4, the math of persistence. What does this actually look like when we chart it all out?
When we map these variables out, it becomes super clear why maintaining a non-zero velocity is the only metric that truly matters. Slowness? That acts as your sustainable base rate, leading to steady accumulation. Stopping? Well, that's your catastrophic event. It places a giant zero multiplier on your momentum. But persistence? Persistence is the holy grail. It acts as compound interest. Just like money sitting in a good index fund, persistent, unbroken effort eventually creates an exponential yield that is absolutely impossible to replicate with short, erratic bursts of energy.
Just look at how that steady effort completely towers over the fast starter over time. The first bar is your classic sprinter. They burst right out of the gate, putting in massive effort, but the friction is way too high, and they stop short. Ultimately, their overall yield is incredibly low. But the second bar? That's our low volatility, measured pace. Day by day, sure, it might look a little less impressive than the sprinter. But because it never stops, the math of persistence simply takes over, resulting in a massive, towering yield over the long haul.
0. I really want this number to sink in for a second. This is the exact mathematical multiplier that gets applied to your career, compounding the literal second you stop. It absolutely does not matter if you were operating at a level 100 for 5 straight years. If you hit a wall and stop completely, your forward velocity instantly becomes 0. And as we all know, anything multiplied by 0 is 0. To win a 30-year game, your primary objective is to keep this specific number entirely out of your personal equation.
All right, finally, let's zoom way out for Section 5, a 30-year horizon. We've talked about the theory and the math, but now let's map this principle directly onto a 3-decade career life cycle to see how it plays out in the real world.
This 30-year timeline is where the real magic happens. It absolutely proves that playing the long game of steady risk assessment is vastly superior to erratic sprinting. Think about it. In Decade 1, your only real job is establishing a sustainable base pace. You're just figuring out how to work without burning out. Then in Decade 2, you use that base pace to survive high-volatility career risks. Maybe it's industry changes, market crashes, or honestly, just a really terrible boss. And then we get to Decade 3. This is where you realize massive compound returns. By Decade 3, the sheer weight of your persistent, unbroken experience makes you virtually unstoppable.
So if you're wondering how to actually put this into practice right now, here are the 3 sequential steps to activate this risk management strategy in your own life. First, honestly calculate your sustainable baseline pace. What can you realistically do every single day for the next 10 years? Second, ruthlessly monitor yourself for burnout. Burnout is the precursor to stopping, which means it's a critical threat. And third, even on your absolute worst days, do something tiny. Never, ever allow your forward velocity to reach absolute 0.
Let's quickly recap what we've pulled from this single brilliant quote today. Slow is safe, it's a high-reliability asset. Stopping is your catastrophic risk because it completely zeroes out your progress. Persistence is the ultimate compounder, turning your daily effort into exponential returns. And finally, true yield cannot be measured in months or even a few years. It requires a long-term, multi-decade horizon to fully materialize.
I'm going to leave you with this final critical thought to kind of evaluate your own trajectory today based on the math we've just explored. Take a really honest look at your daily habits and your stress levels. If your career is a true 30-year model, what is your current pace actually costing you? Are you sprinting towards a catastrophic stop, or are you building an unstoppable, compounding engine of persistence? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember, just keep moving.